Okay, good afternoon. I am Peter Malecki. I'm a major with the Atlanta Police Department. First and foremost, on behalf of the Atlanta Police Department, our thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to the family of Mr. Chris Eberhardt. I am happy to announce today that we will be providing an update on this case, and thankfully we were able to have a quick resolution on the senseless act of violence in our city, and we were able to charge one individual with the death of Mr. Eberhardt. Behind me to my left is Detective Kevin Leonpacker. He was the lead homicide detective assigned to this case. And to my right is Lieutenant Jermaine Dearlove. He is the homicide commander. First of all, anytime we have such a senseless act in our city, it is of the highest priority to this police department that we work as diligently, as quick, and as hard as we possibly can to track down each and every lead in order to bring justice to our grieving families. I'm going to turn this over right now to Detective Leonpacker. He will provide a timeline that will make this case make sense, and then he will be able to provide some of the investigative steps that we took that ultimately led us, in assistance with our federal, state, and local partners, not only in Georgia, but in the state of Alabama, to make a quick arrest in this case. So, Detective Leonpacker.
Hello, my name is Kevin Leonpacker. That's Kevinleonpacher. Again, I'm a detective within the homicide unit under our homicide unit commander, Lieutenant Dearlove, and Major Crimes Commander, Major Malecki. On Thursday, October 13th, at about 4:20 a.m., an Atlanta police officer conducted a traffic stop on a vehicle that we believe was a stolen vehicle. It had no license plate on the back of it, and this was in the area of Interstate 75 and Moores Mill Road. The driver of that vehicle fled the traffic stop, and the officer had reported that there were two occupants inside. The officer continued in the path of flight of that vehicle, at some point losing sight of it, but then finding it on Northside Parkway overturned. But there was only one occupant inside the vehicle at that time. That occupant had sustained some injury and was transported to Grady Hospital, and that was Mr. Braylon Esprit. There were no other occupants inside the vehicle. We believe the second occupant was Mr. Travis Landry, and that somehow he evaded apprehension and detection as being inside of that vehicle prior to it overturning, or escaped the overturned vehicle prior to the arrival of police. And we believe that he was walking around Buckhead, somewhere in that same area, with a firearm, trying to obtain new form of transportation. And we believe that at some point he came across Mr. Eberhardt backed into a driveway on Peachtree Battle Avenue, and he approached him, confronted him, and that confrontation led to the motor vehicle hijacking of Mr. Eberhardt's GMC Sierra pickup and his shooting death there at the scene. At some point, Mr. Landry linked back up with Mr. Esprit. Mr. Esprit left Grady Hospital sometime around 9:30 that morning, and after the two joined back up in the pickup truck, they fled the state of Georgia in Mr. Eberhardt's pickup truck, and we tracked that vehicle to Alabama, southbound on Interstate 65. We relied on some of our federal law enforcement partners to help coordinate a interdiction attempt to intercept that vehicle southbound on Interstate 65. And local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies participated in the stop of that pickup truck as it was entering Mobile County in South Alabama. Two occupants were found inside the vehicle, Mr. Esprit and Mr. Landry, and were subsequently arrested for being in possession of the stolen automobile. They were taken to the Mobile County Jail. I communicated again with our local partners, law enforcement partners there, and hopped in the vehicle and drove straight to Mobile County. I was there at the jail until about 4 o'clock Eastern Time, trying to conduct interviews with these individuals, and the next day continued processing evidence to include the victim's pickup truck. And based off of evidence that we recovered from the individuals in the vehicle, evidence from inside the vehicle and the processing of that vehicle, warrants were issued late Friday night for Mr. Landry's arrest for murder, motor vehicle hijacking, felony murder predicated on motor vehicle hijacking, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. I want to reemphasize that Mr. Esprit was either in the custody of Atlanta police or seeking treatment at Grady Hospital at the time that this homicide occurred. So he is not at this time a suspect in what actually transpired on Peachtree Battle Avenue at the time of the shooting.
How quickly were you able to tie Mr. Landry to the crime, and how were you able to do so?
We had no idea that the traffic stop at 4:20 a.m. was related to the shooting that happened at 7:09 a.m. until Mr. Landry and Mr. Esprit were found inside of the victim's pickup truck. So as soon as the vehicle was stopped and those two individuals were identified, that's when our investigation continued to identify that Mr. Esprit had an interaction with law enforcement earlier in that morning. So not until the vehicle was stopped.
Two quick questions. I assume the traffic stop was because of a stolen tag. Is that? Could you elaborate on the traffic stop?
Sure.
And also, can you tell us anything about the victim? I mean, I know you guys shared his name and age. He lived in the area. Give us a little information about him.
Sure. As far as the traffic stop, when the officer initiated the traffic stop on Interstate 75, he knew that there was significant rear-end damage and no license plate on the back of the vehicle. So that was the probable cause for the stop. The status of that vehicle is still under investigation, but there is some indication that the vehicle was stolen from another location prior to our interaction with it on Interstate 75 and the overturned crash. Mr. Eberhardt was a hard-working citizen of Metro Atlanta. He was a framer working in the area with a contractor on some construction on Peachtree Battle Avenue. We believe that he arrived early that morning, probably to beat the traffic as he drove in from Gainesville in Hall County, and was backed into the driveway waiting the appropriate hour to begin construction on Peachtree Battle Avenue.
Just to confirm, it was that driveway right next to that home on 1225 Peachtree Battle, right?
The drive.
Empty lot.
Sure. Yeah, he was. Mr. Eberhardt was backed into the driveway at 1225 Peachtree Battle Avenue, which is essentially an empty lot. That the driveway still exists, but the house no longer exists at that location.
And is your belief that only Mr. Landry shot at him? Only Mr. Landry was at the scene on Peachtree Battle, not the other suspect?
The investigation is still active and ongoing, and we will work to confirm that only Mr. Landry was involved in this incident, or dispel that. If there's any other suspects that were involved, we hope that will reveal itself as the investigation continues. But at this time, only Mr. Landry is suspected of being involved in the violent confrontation with Mr. Eberhardt that resulted in his death.
You guys have any familiar with the two suspects? They have a record, or you guys know?
I'm not prepared to discuss their criminal history, and I'll emphasize that Mr. Landry is only 18 years old, only turning 18 this year. But that is still a part of the active investigation as well.
Are they both from Georgia, or were they from Alabama and came here and then they went back to Alabama?
Mr. Landry and Mr. Esprit are both from the state of Louisiana, and my understanding from the investigation is that they traveled to the Atlanta area on Sunday, which I believe was October 9th, via Greyhound bus, and they were staying in a hotel in Canton, Georgia, and that was why they were in the metropolitan area. And their path of flight, traveling from Georgia to Alabama and traveling southbound on Interstate 65, suggests that they were traveling back to the state of Louisiana.
Any other questions? Was it New Orleans, or?
I'm sorry?
Any specific city in Louisiana, New Orleans, Baton Rouge?
Both of them have ties to, forgive my pronunciation of the city, Arnaudville, Louisiana.
Okay.
Arnaudville.
Really small.
Right. My understanding is that, again, they traveled via Greyhound bus from Lafayette, Louisiana, but again, both have ties to Arnaudville, Louisiana.
Are you able to show us the other photo? You had another photo of the other suspect?
Yeah, we'll get it back up. We'll get it to you guys.
And what was the motive here?
Well, what we understand from the initial interaction during the traffic stop and subsequent flight of that first vehicle was that we believe that there were two occupants, but only one was apprehended. So Mr. Landry was in Atlanta, a city that he lacked familiarity with. He was staying at a hotel in Canton. His associate was, again, either in the custody of the Atlanta Police Department and continuing into treatment at Grady Hospital, and it was likely he was unable to reach him. So we believe he was in Atlanta, again, a place he was not familiar with a firearm, and he was desperate for transportation to find some other way to leave Atlanta or link back up with his associate.